So, greetings, friends. Today's Dhamma talk is the third in a series of 3 talks on the meaning of becoming. The last 2 weeks, I spoke about the Loka and the Bhava suttas, and all 3 of these suttas relate to the greatly misunderstood teachings on becoming. The 9th link in the independent origination, the 12-link chain that results in all manner of confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing suffering, is the line that says, "From clinging and maintaining comes becoming." And that's been, it's either dismissed entirely. In other words, most people don't even attempt to explain it, or if it's explained through the influence of the Abhidhamma, that 3rd book of the Pali Canon that wasn't taught by the Buddha, as somehow describing a creation myth. In other words, how all phenomena came into being. And a clear reading of dependent origination, whether it's the Paticcasamuppada Sutta or the numerous other suttas where the Buddha teaches dependent origination. It wasn't in just that one sutta. When it's taken in context, the Buddha is describing in dependent origination that from ignorance of 4 noble truths through 12 observable causative links, all manner of confusion, delusion, and suffering arises. And he taught 4 noble truths to explain that process and to bring it to cessation through the Eightfold path. So that singular line there, from clinging and maintaining comes becoming, is I've never seen it translated with a modifier or a qualifier, meaning what becoming what. So it has to be taken in context, as all the suttas, if you take them out of context, they become either meaningless or very confusing. But taken within the right context, the Buddha's talking about what happens, what do we become when we're ignorant of 4 noble truths. So from clinging and maintaining comes becoming means that we are, unless we do something to stop that process rooted in ignorance, we can only become more ignorant. So the Buddha concludes that dependent origination by describing suffering, and then his very first teaching, he teaches that suffering occurs. Suffering is rooted in craving and clinging, referring back to that 9th link. And the 3rd noble truth is that cessation of that process is possible. And the 4th noble truth is that the path leading to the cessation of suffering rooted in ignorance is the Eightfold path. And that's all the Buddha ever taught. So I want to read the 3rd sutta in this. And this is, all 3 of these suttas are on the website link to this. In this sutta, the Mula Sutta, the Buddha asked the assembled monks and nuns a rhetorical question. Monks, if those of other sects ask you, in what are all phenomena rooted? Now remember, we're talking about dependent origination here, not describing the creation of the world. Phenomena arising and experienced from a view rooted in ignorance of 4 noble truths. Monks, if those of other sects ask you, in what are all phenomena rooted? How do they come into play? What is their origination? How are they established? What is their foundation? What is their governing principle? What is their defining state? What is their heartwood? Heartwood means what continues them, what sustains them. Where do they gain footing? And what is their cessation? On being asked this, you should reply, all phenomena are rooted in desire. That's the 2nd noble truth, desire or craving. The Buddha continues, all phenomena come into play through attention, meaning what we hold in mind. All phenomena have contact as their origination. So again, when it's not a creation myth, the reaction to the phenomenal world, when you read dependent origination carefully and understand 5 clinging aggregates, it is at that point of contact that we start reacting to the world. And if our mind is still clouded by ignorance of 4 noble truths, we'll react in a way that is rooted in that ignorance and can only continue that ignorance. The Buddha continues, all phenomena have feeling as their establishment, what we're reacting to. In this sense, it's not just a physical feeling or emotional feeling. Feeling in this sense is any disturbance in the mind. All phenomena have concentration for their foundation. It's ongoing thinking that maintains that ignorance. Ongoing thinking rooted in ignorance maintains that ignorance. And so this process is also describing the somewhat subtle but ongoing strategies that all unawakened human beings develop that allows them to ignore their own ignorance. And this is prevalent in most of the teachings of modern Buddhism. They're really strategies to continue eye-making. All phenomena have mindfulness as their governing principle. What we hold in mind is going to determine what our experience is. And if we're holding in mind, sorry about that, if we're holding in mind principles that are rooted in ignorance, of course, we can only experience a life that follows from that: confusion, delusion, and ongoing suffering. If we have developed the mindfulness that is well framed by the Eightfold Path, then our mind is inclined towards awakening. Let me read that line again. All phenomena have mindfulness as their governing principle. If our governing principle is the Eightfold Path, and we're holding in mind that Eightfold Path, then we'll continue towards awakening, towards full human maturity. This is what the Buddha is teaching to these monks in the original Sangha 2,600 years ago. The Buddha continues. All phenomena have discernment as their defining state. All phenomena have release as their heartwood. That's such an important line. What it means is that even if we're caught up in confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing unsatisfactory experiences, within that phenomena, if we have developed the Eightfold Path, then even the phenomena that would normally keep us in confusion and deluded thinking and experiencing life in very unsatisfactory terms, once we use the Eightfold Path to interrupt dependent origination, then even within the phenomena, there's release in that phenomena, in the heartwood. All phenomena gain footing in impermanence, and that points to the third noble truth and the general principles of the three marks of existence. And finally, all phenomena have unbinding as their cessation. Now remember, this isn't something that happens by magic. The Buddha's teaching this to monks and nuns, that he has previously taught that it is the Eightfold Path that delivers liberation from the process of life rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. That's the end of the sutta, and just a little bit of more commentary. Here the Buddha in the sutta is initially referring to the five clinging aggregates when he says all phenomena rooted in desire. For the five clinging aggregates of form, feeling, perceptions, mental fabrications, and ongoing consciousness rooted in ignorance are the five clinging aggregates. And that simply describes the personal experience of suffering rooted in ignorance. All phenomena rooted in desire and maintained through attention or mindfulness, contact, feeling, concentration, and discernment. And then through the heartwood of the Eightfold Path, gaining release from the effects of desire and developing a profound understanding of the arising and passing away of all phenomena and complete unbinding from self-referential views rooted in ignorance. This came up last night in class in a discussion on the Kakaya Yanagata Sutta, which is a very similar teaching. Also linked on the website. It's in the book. All of these teachings are in my new book too. The question came up about eye making in referring to developing the Eightfold Path. In other words, I'm engaged in right view, I'm engaged in right speech, etc., right meditation, right mindfulness. Isn't there eye making in there? And you have to understand that the Buddha taught the Eightfold Path as a middle way between extreme views. And so that even, it certainly comes into play when we're developing the Dhamma. The Eightfold Path allows us to in fact, it insists that we accept ourselves as human beings with the problems of a human being rooted in ignorance. And starting from that point and accepting that point, developing awakening from that point. In other words, each moment, what becoming refers to ultimately is that each moment holds the potential to either continue a mind rooted in ignorance or develop the Eightfold Path and start inclining that mind towards awakening. And then each moment holds the potential towards awakening. And that's the important point that we should all consider. What am I contributing to my own becoming? Am I going to likely become awakened by what I'm contributing to my own life in this moment? Or am I likely to continue a life rooted in ignorance. And then I can only hope to develop a life of more confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing suffering. I referenced the Kakaya Yanagata Sutta. One of the things that's most important in that sutta is how specific the Buddha is on keeping his Dhamma, all of his teachings, but especially the Eightfold Path, independent of other Dhammas and other Dharmas and other spiritual teachings. Avoid the need of adapting and accommodating the Buddha's pure and direct teachings to fit our own views. And if you look at that clearly, ignorance is another word for simply living life based on wrong views. And that need for a mind rooted in ignorance to ignore its own ignorance creates these strategies of seemingly holistic practices, even modern holistic Buddhist practices, that are an adaptation and accommodation to what he actually taught, that work very well and continue to allow a mind to ignore its own ignorance. So again, the Buddha's emphasizing the need to keep his teaching very pure, very well focused. And as I've developed it over the years, I don't see any good reason to substitute any other teaching for the words of the Buddha, because they're still available to us in their pure form. So I hope you find this series of talks helpful. My new book, Becoming Buddha, Becoming Awakened, goes into much more detail of what the whole point of becoming means. I mean, that's what the title is based on, and took inspiration from that ninth link in the chain of dependent origination. And so all of us can become Buddha. We can become awakened by directly engaging with the Buddha's path. So thank you for joining me today. Peace.